Okay, welcome to another edition of the High Time Psychedelic podcast. And my name is Todd Shapiro. A lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun doing these, and they're becoming more consistent, which is awesome. And we're getting some big names and some really interesting people. I like to surround myself around people who are far brighter than I because then you learn something. And I recommend that everyone do that. Whenever you're with someone, make sure they're brighter than you so you can learn something instead of wasting your time and just gossiping. And this next person is definitely brighter than me, and he's probably brighter than you too. No disrespect to anyone listening, but he's a big brain, and he's a friend. And he can full disclosure, he works with Red Light Holland as well, the company I'm the CEO of. He's an advisor there. Dr. Joe Geraci. Hey, Dr. Joe, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Todd?
Good, man. CEO of NetraMark. NetraMark's a really interesting company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. That's kind of you. So Netra is actually Sanskrit. It means to see. And NetraMark, we are a precision medicine company, and we have kind of a funky AI that we've been using, that we've been building up, and this thing can learn from a small number of patients, and it's actually talking about smart. I hang out with it because it's starting to teach me stuff about cancer and Alzheimer's I never imagined to be true, and we actually validated that this thing actually learns stuff that's real. So we're very excited about it.
How could a computer program learn?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So like you learn how to, like, how you could learn. I don't know if you're boring enough to sit there and code, but like you could learn how to write code and teach a computer a series of instructions. These machine intelligence algorithms, what they do is they essentially write their own instructions, not in the same way, but they kind of like figure out what's going on. You give them some data and say, hey, I want you to learn about these two different types of cancer and what's going on. And then what it will do is it will actually look at the data, the patient samples, and will say, hey, you know what, I'm starting to recognize a pattern here, and then it codes it. The cool thing about what we're doing is this stuff encodes stuff that we didn't even ask it to learn, and it comes out to be true. It's fascinating.
Interesting. So, what types of clients would NetraMark work with then, Joe?
Well, we would work with, like, so we help pharmaceutical companies out who are having trouble with their clinical trials. And then, so we have that side of the business, biotechs, pharma companies. Like there's biotechs out there that want to, cure, kidney fibrosis or lung fibrosis because of COVID. There's groups out there now that are really excited about, being able to attack this, especially because COVID might have some lasting effects. And then there's pharma companies. And then on the other side, what we do is we partner with like groups who are interested in longevity. So we have a partnership with Juvenescence, real cool company. They're going to start selling you products to make you live forever, or at least approach forever, right? And we have a partnership with a very serious oncology company where we're looking at gastrointestinal cancer and ovarian and other stuff as well, pancreatic, right? So we either, a client uses it to help them understand their goal, get closer to their goal, or we what we do is we partner and we figure out how we can drug these diseases in new ways and safer ways.
When it comes to, you mentioned clinical trials, does the regular public understand what a clinical trial is and sort of what it does to help prove out medications and data collection, et cetera?
I don't think so. I don't think people realize. I mean, I think pharmaceutical companies get a really bad rap, and sometimes they deserve it, right? But a lot of the times they don't, and I think they don't realize how much work goes into actually how much work goes into extracting some real verifiable knowledge about the world. It's very, very difficult. Most of the stuff that we walk around with in our heads and we believe is not real, right? It requires validation, especially because I'm going to give your kid a medicine, right? And you're not going to trust it unless I can, at least I can say, hey, there's 90% chance your kid's going to get better, but you're going to want to know about that 10% chance that, it can damage your child. And to get to that, even that level of certainty is very, very expensive and very tricky.
And what are some of the, I've obviously researched and being involved with Red Light Holland, and I understand now more than I ever had in the past about the different phases and how, the length it takes to get into sort of medical and proving it out. But um, it's a lengthy process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So the process usually is like, okay, what's the disease? What protein are we going to actually target, right? Or what biological mechanism are we going to go after? So that's what drugs do, right? Drugs and therapies, right? What they do is they actually interfere or augment your molecular circuitry. So you guys have this, all of us. I'm speaking like I'm not human. Sometimes I feel like I'm more of a
You
computer, right? But
guys.
right,
You
but
guys on planet Earth, you have
that's
this.
right.
Thanks.
Right, right.
Mm.
So I apologize for that lapse there. But yeah, yeah. So all all life forms, including your cat and dog and you, we have this molecular machinery, and ours is particularly complex. And so the first thing is to figure out like, and this is a big problem now. And you asked about NetraMark. This is really like, I usually don't answer it this way, but we have to figure out where, like, what the disease is. When a doctor talks about ovarian cancer or they talk about Alzheimer's, it those names don't mean anything anymore because there's a lot of sub diseases that go on, right? Like one of our research projects, we're just going to put out a paper, says that there's over 63 ways to get to dementia, right? Like there's, and you what you have to do is you have to identify, okay, what aspect of the dementia are you looking at, right? So there's, and I'm not going to get into all the different types, but there's a lot of complexity, especially like with cancer. It's astonishing. So stage one, right, is very hard because you have to figure out what you're going to attack and what molecule you're going to use, and then you have to do some animal. You have to make sure it's safe. You have to do dose escalation, and that takes a couple of years. And then phase two is like, let's do a small sample of people. And once you get there, you're excited, and you're just basically testing out, seeing what's going on. And then that's usually not easy, but easier to pass. And then phase three is the real thing. That's like you have a few hundred people taking your drug. You're blinded, right? We're working on something called an adaptive trial to speed this up, which means you let the patients come in and do the drug, and you actually let an AI monitor how they're doing, and you open it up and you say, you know what, our drug's actually working better with these people, and you adapt, right? So there's all these things are coming that is going to speed it up. But you can just imagine that, and the FDA has to validate that what you're doing is actually real
So
and working.
what's after phase three then? When you do the trial and you get the results, what's that next step to go? Okay, this could be a viable drug.
Yeah, so what happens is it ends up in the clinic, and what you do is then you monitor like the actual universe, right? So at the bottom of all this, right? And I'm a mathematician, but I'm speaking more of a scientist, right? There's statistics underneath it, which basically means this. It's this, right? If I study 10 people who have I don't know, lung cancer, and there's an effect, what's the chance that those 10 people actually reflect the universe? Or like you and I, we're going to look at how psilocybin can actually affect people's, and like, you and I are starting to talk about how the microbiome is involved and all that, right? And like, how much confidence will you have in 10 people? How much confidence will you have if I have 100 or 200 or 1,000? So it always gets to, what's it really saying about the universe of people? And that's very tough, right? And so what happens at phase four is you actually start observing stuff you've never expected, like adverse reactions and things like that. But it's out there. It's in the clinic. It's being used, right? And that's basically the deal, right? You just try to approach a real understanding. What's happening now with companies like ours, and with the efforts of pharma companies, we're trying to make things more precise. Like, I'm sure there's people that are going to respond to psilocybin for depression in miraculous ways, and other people that are not, right? And why is that? And can you define that precisely? And that takes work, and all these phases.
Dr. Joe Geraci with us, a CEO of NetraMark and a big understander of science and mathematics. When it comes to psychedelics, are you excited by the sector as a whole? And two-part question. One, just the idea that there's many companies exploring these types of potential medications one day again, and then two, just really the idea that um, it's not just exploring it, but it feels like a big stigma has been ended too. So sort of on more of a personal kind of everyday use side of things. It's like, well, wait a second, maybe it's not as fucked up as maybe people thought it was.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, it's got an amazing history of. I mean, everyone should read about the first time, you know, a scientist got on his bicycle on the way home when accidentally, ingesting, LSD, right? And see, these just because something's psychoactive and can be revelatory doesn't mean that it can't have, right, and a hell of a lot of fun in some circumstances. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have very, very serious medical use, consequences and use. And I mean, the exciting thing is this: is that we started observing a long time ago. Like, I mean, even in the 60s, scientists were looking at this, right? And there was this massive stigma that came around it. But and then there was, I can go on and on about all that. But really, like, what's happened is there's been generations of people using this drug recreationally, and then there's conservative attitudes that have wrapped themselves around cannabis and psilocybin and LSD and so forth. But what's happening now is we actually have come to understand a couple of things fundamentally, and it all comes down to this: is that it looks like psilocybin is doing something very special to the way the different circuits in our brain are talking to each other, and this could have massive effects for mood disorders. For, I mean, a study being done in San Diego right now. Like, I saw results. I mean, this guy. So I don't know if you know what phantom limb is. Do you know what phantom limb? Yeah, right.
Just
Yeah,
to be honest, from speaking with you. So yes,
yeah. So
in
yeah.
the
So
past,
so
yeah.
phantom limb is when someone loses a limb and then they can feel like the limb is there, and for a lot of these people, the pain is substantial.
Ugh.
I mean, like, unbelievable pain. Like, they don't have the limb, they shouldn't feel the pain, right? And one of these guys was actually feeling like their bone was breaking every
Oh my God.
night, and they did a course of the stuff that you sell at Red Light, and he's been
Sorry,
cured.
I just want to be clear.
And
Intend to sell. We're working
intent,
on
yeah,
selling.
yeah, yeah,
As a publicly
yes,
traded company, I don't want to
yes.
mislead anybody. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
yes,
No,
good,
don't be
good for
sorry. I got to
you.
clarify this stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta take
yeah,
everyday
yeah,
natural conversations and be like really precise with that stuff. But we are, as people know,
yeah.
we're in development. We're setting up our facility, and we've working on a collaboration that I've announced. So that's not material information. Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, you're very good at that. Good
I
for you.
have to be. I
So,
have to be. I miss just
I,
spewing.
I,
I miss just talking whatever came out of my mouth. Now it's like, you make
yeah,
sure that everything you say isn't, yeah, I get it. I get it.
exactly. You're under diligence constantly. Um, so, yeah, to be precise, that you intend to sell, that these substances have massive potential, but they also have a massive potential to be abused, right? So,
Yeah.
we all have to be responsible with them. But yeah, medicinally, I'm super excited because it's there's something I've noticed in working in this field for a while, and it's that some. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example that has nothing to do with psilocybin, but it's something amazing I've noticed, and there's some companies that what they do is they actually harness natural biological products and they just find a way to put it back in. So, for example, I can't get totally into it because I'm doing work for this company, but so in some cancers, in 15% of cancers, there's this gene that's turned off, and it allows the immune system to be hijacked by the cancer, right? So the immune system is responsible for turning that stuff off, right? And so this thing's missing and it gets hijacked. So what they do is they just replace it. And what happens is there's no side effects because you're doing something that our bodies have been engineered to work with. Another group I know is curing inflammatory bowel disease and cancer, a certain type of cancer, by using stuff that women spew out while they're pregnant. And because all of us have been exposed to this, right? There's this amazing multifactorial effect it has without screwing us up. Because that's what happens when we design drugs. You end up targeting something, and it creates an imbalance. It's like, remember those games, those 3x3 things with the numbers, and you slide them around with your thumbs, and you try to make them, or pictures, you put the picture together. It's like, and you notice that sometimes you almost have it except two pieces are
Yep.
off, and if you move one, you flip the other.
Oh,
Well, it's like treating diseases like that.
uh,
And so with these natural products, which we have evolved with, or our ancestors have evolved with, you end up having these effects that are not, don't cause these drastic imbalances. And psilocybin, you know, the reason I agreed to help, develop your science side is because I am excited about the potential there. Because, it is a product that works with us. I mean, the experience can be very intense at high doses, don't get me wrong. But there's very little, as far as we know right now, there's very little in terms of these type of very serious side effects. Right. So it's beautiful.
yeah. I obviously read every day a new article or just stuff from the past about psilocybin specifically because it holds true to me in this company, and anecdotally I can speak of it as well. And I mean, do you start to believe in what we're hearing about how it can really be a massive cure for mental health crisis, and also help be maybe potentially be able to help people get off other addictions, opioids, etc. And because of what they say, and things I've read about, there are no addictive traits within it, that there's no addictive qualities to psilocybin from everything that I've read.
Right. Exactly. So, um, so there's, so hallucinogenics have been looked at this, from this perspective of being able to combat addiction, and and also, to treat mood disorders. I mean, this is something that psychiatrists have been thinking for a while, and the reason is this connection to serotonin, right? That we figured out. We don't quite understand all of how those these serotonergic reuptake inhibitors work. But so there's so okay, let's put it this way: the ability for these drugs to alter certain patterns in our brain is extremely attractive. And this is why that guy's phantom limb pain went away, and that's why we know certain people respond, and you have long lasting effects for mood disorders from this. Right, I've been talking about this now for 10 years, right? Because I saw a study where so I used to do work with functional MRIs, and this is really where you see it. So my functional MRI work was centered around mood disorders and something called transcranial magnetic stimulation. So you actually put this massive magnet on these people's heads. If you look me up, you can see these papers. Right, I developed the statistics and mathematics around this, on how to understand what's going on there, and the neurobiology. And what happens is it breaks the circuit for some people. So I was figuring out why some people respond, some people don't. And these functional MRIs basically are cartoons of how our brains are. So imagine your brain being like 10 different computers that are wired together, and they all talk to each other, right? So you have like reward centers, you have like, you know, uh, your situation in space centers, you're planning for the future, like all kinds of stuff. You're keeping track of time. It's monstrous complexity. But what happens in some people is they get trapped in these things. And I've been able to model this mathematically. You can actually see some people's brains get trapped in these type of cycles. And when you look at what magic mushrooms do, and with some people in the MRI, you can actually see it actually breaks these networks, and it does it in a very safe way. But what happens sometimes is you get this persistent effect, and actually, it might happen all the time, which explains why so many people have had transformative, positive experiences. Now, I still always have to say you have to be careful when doing this stuff, right? Because it can be very powerful, right? But yeah, that's the effect. There's something really happening there, and that's why there's so much attention. That's why people are investing in you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and investing. And listen, there's a lot of more medical plays in us. We're also recreational, and I don't want to make this only about my company. It's sort of a psychedelic podcast to speak about really all psychedelics. You just happen to be involved with us, but um, I learned something really interesting even last week on last week's podcast with Paul Austin. He works for the Third Wave, and he talked about the belief in companies who do this responsibly to provide psilocybin specifically recreationally, because the way he said it, and he phrased it like this, is if you can get behind the science, which is, you know, your job and others' jobs to show this stuff, in a way, you're actually providing people affordable medication, even though it's recreational. And with a mental health crisis so imminent as it is, sometimes people really have to self-medicate to cope. It's sad to say, but, you know, listen, people have been doing it with alcohol for years. People have been, you know, smoking cigarettes to
Cigarettes.
de-stress for years, like you name it. And you know, is it fair to say that, you know, I know there's science behind it, but that maybe making psilocybin more available, and let's be honest, the other thing is people can get it. If you want it, you can order online. People are doing it illegally. You can get this stuff. People can get it. I don't recommend doing it illegally. You can get busted that way, but if you want it, you can get it. It's I think human beings, and I don't know what you think of this, being a scientist and wanting to prove out medications and stuff, but do you ever begrudge humans for wanting to try to actually be responsible and take care of themselves?
No, no, I don't. Actually, I mean, it's something that, I mean, I have to be careful when speaking about this
Yeah,
because there's this authority of science that I'm representing, right?
of course.
But I mean, as a human being, right? Like you're like let's put this in perspective, right? You're this being that can actually, if you spend enough time with me, you can actually understand how a star works. I mean, this is a ridiculous thing, right? You can actually do the mathematics of the fluid dynamics of the inside of the engines of life. Okay, you have that level of intelligence, right? You might make fun of yourself, but if you do enough math for long enough, you're going to be able to one day write down the Stokes equation and say, "Holy crap!" Right? There's like, you know what I mean? And put this in perspective. You're like, you know, we're at the same time we can be really stupid, right? I mean, you know, cognitive dissonance is a big problem. So the only thing I say is this: you have to, you can take care of yourself, you can engage in this way, and if you do, then try your best to make it a positive experience. Have somebody that, you know, loving with you, and and also like understand it's not just a trip. Like you can actually unwind some of these knots that we form as we grow. You know, and I think there's something there, right? Just freaking be careful, right?
Yeah, no, it's smart that you say that, and it's all about sort of responsible use and talking about it that way. Are you do you study social movements in science, meaning that, you know, if people were pushing for cannabis, well, okay, we got to, you know, explore cannabis more. People are pushing, you know, legal psychedelics, we got to look in LSD, we got to look into, you know, psilocybin, we got to look in MDMA, we got to look in all this stuff because there's a social movement where people want it, they're getting it anyway. So does that ever, you know, spearheads a science to help, you know, maybe force that issue a little bit more?
I mean, that's an amazing question, and it's actually like it's a complex issue. I admit this as part of my training. So I was trained as a mathematician, I was trained as a physicist, and I was trained in medicine, right? And my physics training had a component like this, where we actually studied what was going on with physics, you know, because physics has these very clear revolutions, right? Like, you know, like when relativity came about, you had a group of people calling it Jewish physics, hilariously, right? And what happens is there was this social impact, and then of course the reverse happened. Once we accepted, once enough physicists came around and said Einstein's not a kook, and you know what he's saying is actually really, really accurate, astonishingly accurate. It started influencing culture, and
Mm.
that happens. Like we don't notice it, but when we watch our children engage in their environment, they pick things up ambient, right? There's this ambient information that the science causes to happen. And what's happening, this is going to happen now, I believe. We're going to see it with this movement. We've been so under the weight of oppressive religious belief, right, for so long that we're just starting to slide out. And amazing scientists like Dr. Nutt, right, who he told me a story where his funding literally ran out the day he was allowed to start because it took, you know, it wasn't being accepted by the conservative, you know, British, right? But it's moving. So, I mean, but to be honest, like beyond my training in physics and looking at social structures, like studying this guy, this author Poppers, who He wrote a book called The Structure of the Scientific Revolution. You can take those rules and you can see it happening now. It's just, this is very different. This is like that. Back then it was more about, like with the physics revolutions, about you learn a paradigm, you hold on to it, and the young people, the young lions are like, no, quantum mechanics, right? And the older lions are like, God doesn't play dice, right, or whatever. Here, what's happening is a bit different. There's layers, there's social layers of religious conservatism and liberal-minded science that have battled, and it looks like this undulation that you see in society between these two forces is maybe just starting to benefit science. Maybe
Yeah.
watching COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I guess COVID must have slowed things down a little bit in certain departments because the focus is COVID now. So a lot of funding's gone into COVID solutions, COVID opportunities.
Yeah.
Has that changed a bit of what you're doing and people around you?
It did, and like and I just wanted to make a comment there to
Sure.
go back to your last point because it's beautiful. It's like what COVID scared me because I know that social media can deviate, the social, like a population's view of science, right? Like, and they start developing their own opinions. And I was frightened by seeing how much cognitive dissonance there was against, like even, Todd, like you went and you dealt with it in a beautiful way, right? Like you was like, I'm gonna build my company, but I'm gonna take care of my family because you understand there's something there, but there's a lot of denial. Anyway, not gonna get into that. But that's part of the story there too, right? There's this battle between science and what people think of science. Now, in terms of the way COVID affected, yeah, I mean, COVID has actually stopped programs, right? Like, there's a hospital that we shouldn't talk about publicly that you and I might engage with, and there, a delay there is actually COVID. The actual ethics review boards are only looking at COVID stuff until last week. This week is the first time they're looking at non-COVID stuff, which is good news, right? But yeah, it's slow. It really impacted all of this.
Dr. Joe Geraci, back to psychedelics and stuff. Do you ever are you allowed to talk about personal use or people you might know who use and sort of their experiences or things that you read or
Sure.
things that make you a believer, especially with that you mentioned mental health side of things?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. So I don't know. A lot of people don't know that I spent decades meditating. I even sat with Buddhist monks and all this stuff. I did that. It was always an interest of mine. And ultimately, the states of mind that you can achieve after years and years of practice is comparable to some states of mind you can achieve with a microdose. Right? I'm not promising enlightenment or anything like that. But the idea that you could that okay, if you put someone in an MRI, this people argue about this. Okay, so it's not 100% agreed upon, but there's really good evidence that when you watch someone in an MRI, like a Buddhist practitioner in an MRI meditate, that breaking of the network I was talking about, that happens. And the same thing happens. So, and what it's about is, um, so Alan Watts is someone I really recommend for people to listen to if you want to catch a glimpse into this, right? Especially from a Westerner's perspective. And he often talks about how us in the West, or all over the world, to be honest, we end up chronically thinking. We're suffering. We're chronic sufferers of thinking, right?
For a guy whose mind never stops, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like you and I have this disposition,
Oh,
right?
yeah. A
And
blessing and a
so
curse. A blessing and a
right,
curse.
exactly, yeah, because you can anticipate, but you're always on high alert, and it's not good. It's not good for you, and it can create. And the problem is that chronic obsession with thinking. What it does is it means you're never present. You're never here, right? And so the gift that the Eastern, what I call spiritual physics, right? What they give us when you practice this really well is you end up at least being able to spend some time really present. And to be really present, it means that you're not anticipating, you're not thinking stuff. And and the psilocybin experience, when done right, can actually lead you in that direction. That's why I'm a believer that I think that as we loosen up around psilocybin, there's going to be amazing integrations between computer technology and us being able to experience ourselves in a new way through psilocybin and in hyper safe ways. We're not talking about big doses here, right? Just you know what I'm
Well,
talking about.
no, but get back to that. It's really neat because I always think that innovation can partner with oldest forms of anything, and a natural based fungi. Let's be honest, is one of the oldest forms of anything.
That's right. Yeah,
it-
yeah.
and much like cannabis was, like I know cannabis was was around when the dinosaurs were around. I've spoken with people, and I'm sure the fungi was too, and that you would have been able to find psilocybin. So um, when you can combine these worlds, I always think of what kind of benefits, if you do it properly, uh, what can happen and what can come out of that. And as a guy who understands both, which you are, scientist, understanding quantum computing, understanding technology, understanding numbers, it's a really interesting thing. I like this sort of juxtaposition, perhaps merging together, because really what that does is create, my layman's opinion here, but it creates information education in a fun way, I think.
No, no, that's an interesting point. And what you're talking about is this integration and fusion of different aspects, like things we thought were never merged. But I mean, there is an awakening that can take place. I mean, it's really all of this mental health. Okay, there's very serious problems, pain issues that I think psilocybin are going to address. And it's really just about the fact that the drug is working in a way that, like, I've been classically trained to think about drugs. Okay, there's that part of psilocybin.
Okay.
That's great. Right? Maybe psilocybin, maybe mescaline, maybe LSD, dimethyltryptamine, whatever. There are those hardcore, and maybe there's elements in the mushroom that we don't know, like the way the terpenes within cannabis and so forth. So these things act classically, like the way I was trained about, drug fits inside of protein and blocks. Okay, so there's all that. Put that aside. There's the aspect that we were getting to when you were starting to ask about, my own personal experiences, and what happens is that to be able to obtain a practice that you can do regularly, that you can actually even bring a little level of sacredness to, right? Humans, we need this. So, like, we're not all of us are religious, but all of us are, we have routine and we have ceremony. Okay. And there's something really beautiful about ceremony, and you see it when people perform music together. When musicians perform together, their brains actually start to synchronize. Okay, so there's community, like, there's so much we can do, but to just drive it home, there's this aspect of psilocybin, and I might not be sounding scientific, but it really is science. We're just starting to enter this realm where it allows you to become so present that you remember very clearly. You become that you are this animal on this ball of mud spinning around this massive nuclear furnace, and it's an amazing sort of ceremony, right? And that presence of mind is going to bring healing, because it's going to break patterns. And so this is what I'm talking about. So there's all the real, like, okay, Dr. Joe, talk about the fact that psilocybin hits a serotonergic, okay, but there's the other side, and that's what you're getting to when you start integrating fun ways, right? Like, so for example, I'll tell you, one of the things when I was a kid that convinced my family I needed special help was I built a lie detector when I was 11 years old, and my parents didn't believe it, so they sent me somewhere. So, and the way it worked is you'd hold on to wires, and if you lie, you change your conductivity. And I hooked it up to a speaker, and I can tell from the pitch change that you're lying, right? And then what I ended up doing was I ended up learning how to change the pitch myself. So I'm like, what is this sense that I have that I'm able to control my conductivity? And this happened to me very young as a kid. And that's when I started becoming around 12 years old. I became interested in yoga and meditation and all that. And imagine now there's all these EEG devices that you can hook up, you can pull it on, you can start playing games. And if you do that with psilocybin, can you imagine the interactive meditative experience? That's the integration you're talking about, right? So yes, I have that. I totally see where we can go on that side, right? So there's hardcore, like, yes, it's medicine, and then there's experience.
Back to the medicine side, Dr. Joe. Are in your community, when you're named as an advisor, say to Red Light Holland, or other people who talk about psychedelics in general, is there more of an openness in the scientific community to say we got to get back to exploring this, or is there even a stigma in that industry as well, which is no, this is a hardcore drug, it can never do well? Like, is there more of an acceptance on that side?
The medical community has been very embracing. They're cool.
Hmm.
The more the scare is, I get more from the business side. Like, are you sure you want to do that because it might damage NetraMark's reputation? I'm like, it's just it. My colleague said it best. She said, "A molecule is a molecule, right? There's real power in this thing, right? It's a molecule. It's like you're a molecular machine, right? A computer program is, you write code and right bits talk to bits. Your bits are actually encoded in molecules, right? And you might be a molecular machine connected to a vast array of afterlives. Don't get me wrong, I don't know. I'm not claiming to know that, but from my perspective and 20 years of doing this stuff, you're a freaking molecular machine, right? And this is molecules that have effects. They all have good and bad effects, including one of our favorite molecules, sugar. It's great. It can mess you up, right? So that's why my I don't care, right? Yeah, but we have to be careful, like I said. But no, Todd, I can tell you, the MDs are starting to loosen up around, especially the psychiatrists.
You before COVID hit, you're a well-traveled individual. Do different cultures accept psychedelics differently than others?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I usually notice that where there's religiosity embedded in the culture, there's just less acceptance. I mean, I knew a family where their mom had Parkinson's, and I said, just I knew this family intimately. I said, just she likes cannabis. There's a lot of reasons why cannabis works for Parkinson's, and they refused to give it to her just based on religious, which I don't understand at all, right? But and so yeah, there is this difference, and like in terms of the European countries, I don't know. I haven't explored that really yet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that of course in Amsterdam has a certain openness, but yeah, I mean, I think that in some South American cultures, I could see them having a difficult time, maybe, right? But at the same time, South American cultures, their native cultures, ha- were so enriched by hallucinogenics, like as you know, right? Ayahuasca and all this, right? All cultures have had this.
How
Yeah.
important is data collection now at this point, beyond just um, I guess beyond just usage, like the actual data, the numbers side of things?
Yeah, I deviate from other people on here, because so a lot what I do, Todd, and I think this is what I do is I integrate different aspects of humans together into a story. So I look at their blood markers, their genetics, their what we call transcriptomics. There's all this other molecular machinery going on, genetic machinery, proteins, your poop, right? What's in your mouth, right? The way you answer questions, your attitude. So I integrate all these things, and using artificial intelligence, you can get a really good picture about what's going on with a person. So um, the way the way I take this is like I think that we have to. I think for psilocybin, for hallucinogenics in general, I think there's a lot of effects we don't understand yet, And so I think we have to empower this a bit more. We need to collect better genetic information. And I think that, and I've told you this, I think there's an intimate connection between psilocybin and our guts, and the way our guts and our brains talk to each other through the vagus nerve, right? And I think things like this need to be explored. It's awesome.
I mean, it sounds simple, and this is where I'll pull my simple analogies into this. But anyone can relate to, stomach kind of anxiety feelings with the brain having anxious moments, and it's like, well,
You
why?
got it.
Why the
Yeah.
butterflies in the stomach now? Like, why not? Because they're not butterflies in the stomach when I'm relaxed, I'm calm, I'm up, north for having a nice pint with a friend. I'm not having anxiety then. So there really is this. Can you speak to the connectivity between what you're learning about the brain and the stomach?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is some exciting stuff. So I ended up learning about I we all studied the vagus nerve, but it's something in passing, right? And then what happened? I ended up marrying this woman, right? Todd, you know her. She had an epilepsy that wasn't she wasn't responding to medication, and she was having seizures with me when we were falling in love, and I, in my arrogance, I'm like, oh, I'll help her one day, it's fine, like whatever. But one day her breathing stopped during a seizure, and it scared the crap out of me. So it changed my attitude. I'm like, oh, this is actually something. So what I did is I looked at her medication and all that, and we got her to stop everything, and then I brought her this device. I told her family, I said, I want to electrocute your daughter through her neck, right, to stimulate this vagus nerve. So they're like, what? And so we got this device. She did it, and her seizures, 90% of her seizures vanished. And so we're like, so people are like, how did you come up with this? I'm like, well, it's actually understood that the vagus nerve has this role in epilepsy and migraine stuff, but I just figured out a way to do it without surgery, right? And to use this other device. And now we have an even better device. And so now she has like a seizure maybe once a year. So the thing is this: you have this literal highway of information between the bottom of your brain. One branch goes into your brain, another branch goes into your heart, and another branch goes to your gut. And you described it perfectly. That gut feeling is actually passing through the vagus nerve, and it hits this computer at the bottom of your brain that is there for like that type of situation. Like, I don't like this person. This is a bad situation, right? Like, yeah, you and I were wired in our way. We understand that. And so, but we're very immature in terms of our understanding. Now, some people are proposing that actually some Parkinson's starts through misfolded proteins that actually crawl back up, right, into the brain and causes this dopaminergic neurons to be damaged and so forth. In the substantia nigra, I can get into it, but like, so there is this anatomy, and there's this real connection between our gut and our brain. And I think I have a hypothesis about the psilocybin role there, hallucinogenics role, to be honest. And it's the amount of information we're learning about this now is amazing. And that goes back to your data question. I actually got data from an inflammatory bowel disease thing from the gut, and I was starting to get like, oh, I'm starting to understand the genetics of and the way proteins are. And all of a sudden, thousands of new molecules I didn't understand are coming out of the AI, out of the data. I'm like, what's going on here? And so that's what's making me excited about what we could do there. So that's the data.
How time consuming that is for a human being to then go and analyze the new data. Like, is that like if the computers are, in the systems that, these learning systems that, spew out these analytics and stuff, is that where it becomes difficult then to go and monitor through all that, to go, okay, wait a second, we found something here through the system we've created, but it's more time to then explain it.
Yeah, I know. So okay, so the hard part really is like, you have to go around to these people, they have to take their poo and send it to you, right, and store it somehow, and then you have to process this stuff. It takes like a month or so, and then you get the data and you organize it and you put it in the machine. Okay, and then the beginning, like the beginning stuff's very quick. Like, you'll be able to answer questions about psilocybin and like poop, right, very, very quickly. It's the other stuff it's basically going to create a whole new set of questions that is going to feed other PhD students and other, you know what I mean? Right. And that's what I'm excited to participate in. Because there's a whole new realm there that we don't understand.
Can maybe it's such a general question, but can humans be cured of things? I mean, can we?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
That's a great.
can we? You know, can we be? We're always searching for cures, but it doesn't seem that things really ever go away. You know, there's if anything, more things are coming to the forefront, and I think in a good way, because it's forcing actual, you know, development. You know, post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. You know, maybe that was hidden too deep for too long for people.
Yeah. All of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
and I guess, sorry, I'm asking two questions in one, which you should never do, and I just haven't done radio in a long time. But sometimes are we learning too much about ourselves too? Sometimes where it causes more anxiety.
No. Let me. Yeah. There's that aspect of it, and we're an anxious culture because we're bombarded with information, and we're not trained in how to understand, you know, what's BS and what's not,
Yes.
how to deal with it, and to meditate. Yeah. But let me. Your first question is actually, it's so beautiful, and I'll explain it to you perfectly. Okay. Once you understand this little metaphor I'm going to teach you, you're going to get it. Okay. But you have to pick. Do you want the cystic fibrosis version, or do you want the lung cancer version? Pick one.
I'd actually like to do the lung cancer version, only because it's
Okay.
something that my stepmother's been dealing with, so it's something I know a little bit about.
Okay. So here it is. Okay. We know you always hear it, smoking and a type of lung cancer are highly associated. Okay. So I'm going to teach you and your audience in not in all detail, but what's going on there. Okay. The smoke eventually can mutate this gene, right, through this various processes, methylation, whatever. It screws up this protein we call P53. Okay, and P53 has this job. What it does, it lives inside the center of the cell where the DNA is, and it regulates what's going on. It goes up and down, and it says, "Hey, this is out of place." And what it does is it creates a repair. It can change shape, and it calls a repair program. Now, when it comes back and the repair program fails to fix the mistake, it calls a suicide program. And when you're young and healthy, the suicide program comes in, tells the cell to commit suicide, and it dies. The cell goes away, right? And so that means it can't make daughter cells that are screwed up too. It's a beautiful solution, right? We call it apoptosis. When you smoke, you kill P53's ability to create that apoptotic signal, to commit that suicide. And so what happens is an error can propagate. Now, what we do at our level of understanding of how to engage with the universe at that such a small level is what we do is we try to interfere with that, and we try to restore the apoptotic signal, or we try to destroy the cancer, or we try to. But if we know this that precisely, all we have to do is go back into the patient's DNA, remove the error, put back, right? Just reprogram, and it will be as their lungs will return to youth. It's so the answer to your question is absolutely. We're starting to understand the universe at that level, our cells, our molecular machinery, but we're not at the point of engineering yet where we can CRISPR this stuff away. But I just said CRISPR. So people out there look up. CRISPR is a way that might be able to do this. So this is really, so what happens is instead of this drug paradigm we're talking about, we're going to actually be able to reprogram these errors. So these children with cystic fibrosis, it's one miscoded letter. And you know, when you see letters of DNA, it's one letter. If you flip it back, their lungs, their genes will code for the proper protein, and they can breathe again, right? Huntington's disease. You just have to remove all the CAG repeats, right? People who have, you know, ApoE mutations, no Alzheimer's for that type of person. Right? There's all kinds of various ways. You see what I'm saying? See what's happening? So what we're doing, my main focus over the last 10 years has been to understand really where do we have to change things, and then we move forward. I talk to companies now that have these little nano vacuum cleaners that they do the opposite of what drugs do. They come in and actually vacuum away in between your cells. They vacuum away the stuff that's being hijacked that allows the cancer to exist. So they're asking me, oh, where do we, how do we, right, attack this stuff? And so so I'm developing a map of, that's why I'm sitting in the position I'm in, because I've dedicated myself to understand exactly what these things are. So it's an amazing question that you asked. Yeah, you can. We just don't know how to do it. We don't have the engineering to go down there unless you have an infection, right? And then, or you have a broken bone. You can cure a broken bone.
Fair enough.
Right?
Fair enough.
Those guys know what they're doing, right? Yeah. But we don't. Yeah.
Well, listen, my hopes and dreams are that with all this research now going into psychedelics, is that we find a way to, if we can't cure it, at least help it, mental health, because it's a massive crisis right now, and I don't know if the world's ever felt this type of crisis that's going on, and it's very dark times, and I try to remain positive and be a goofy, joyous guy, and I've lost a lot of my humor, I'll tell you that much. Because you don't want to even tell a joke anymore because you're worried it's going to offend someone, so that fucking sucks. Because now all of a sudden, if it was just taken the wrong way, or if you were just outspoken the wrong way, so now I'm causing my own anxiety by even attempting a laugh, and then B, I just think that there's just a lot of people going through a lot of personal shit, and so you just kind of don't even want to steer them one way or the other. You just hope they can deal with it, and I hope that the more we learn, because anecdotally, there's just, in my opinion, way too much information, anecdotal information from people saying this has helped them. That, to me, that's the best case study I could ever listen.
Yeah, it's become science. It's a very good point you're making. It's become science. Now all we need to do now is package it, do statistics, and now empower companies like Red Light Holland and other companies that are moving in that direction. I'm really excited about what's it called? Sorry.
Scarlet Lily. Yeah.
Scarlet.
Of
Scarlet.
course.
That's the name.
Yeah, I lost your video for a sec, Dr. Joe. I got your name big up there. There it is.
Hold on.
It's all right. It's all right. Did we lose you? There you go. We can't miss that handsome face.
I kicked one. I have another keyboard down here.
How many keyboards you have?
There's a few around here.
Okay. No, listen, I'm excited by everyone talking about this. Everyone. And forget about this company, just psychedelics in general, because whenever you can end a stigma, and whenever you can, again, I always say the two words, educate and inform people, and then get the science and some numbers behind it and get people looking into it, I think everyone's going to win. And you win either way, because people are doing this anyway. So you might as well learn what you're doing and learn about what you're doing.
That's true.
So everyone wins. Either way, we're all winning here. And I hope we can be a part of change, because I don't know. I worry about it sounds, man, I hate getting old. I used to be funny and jovial, but I worry about kids and their future and them getting along. And I worry about humans connecting again. Like, I felt like we grew up around the exact same era, actually. And, I at least my experiences were very fortunate. I got along with pretty much anyone in junior high and high school. And of course there's little fights here and there, but it wasn't like these big divides and it was just kind of like you just got along. And I want to be part of the process of making humans realize it's like we need aliens to attack like Independence Day so we can get along again and protect each other.
But remember this. There's, the group of people we call the greatest generation, right? These people born in 1910 and so forth, like our parents, they're from our generation's grandparents, right? They went through this, Todd. If you look at what Nazi Germany brought to the world, right? There were a series of tyrants around the world, and life was terrifying and they got through it, right? And humans, we just need the problem now is that there's people like me building things that could literally destroy us. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
we need the scientific
take
maturity.
AI's taking over. Yeah.
I was thinking more about, fusion. I mean, these bombs. But
Oh,
yeah,
I
I
see
mean,
that too. Yeah, both.
yeah.
Oh, great.
But we've always been there. Yeah, it's hard. But I
Well,
think all of us need a break from COVID.
yeah, we need a break. Well, we just need governments to legalize psilocybin all over the world and tell people to use it responsibly and chill out a little bit here.
That's right.
I don't know.
Microdose for everybody.
It should be microdose for everyone. I hope we can get there. I hope we can say that honestly, not just legally in certain parts of the world. But, I laugh. I watched Wally on the weekend with my son. And, and it's like, it's amazing some of these movies that are sort of predictive of culture and where we're going. And back to, you look at what Elon Musk is doing, exploring, life away from this planet and how we're treating this planet. And I don't know,
Oh yeah.
man, 500-600 years from now, I hope we're not just adult babies that can barely walk because we're sitting in floating chairs with,
Yeah,
everything on
like
our smartphones telling us what to do. But we got to get back to living and connecting and being in the moment, like you said, Joe. It's good stuff, man. It's a lot of fun talking with you.
thank you. Yeah, yeah,
There's
you too.
Well, let's
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
more. Where can people find more about NetraMark and sort of what you're doing, and where can people follow you?
Well, we're going through a transformation. I mean, right now, if you look me up on LinkedIn, there's quite a bit of, I do a few announcements here and there, and there's quite a bit of activity around some stuff we did around COVID, and of course our work. We're about to put out a paper on Alzheimer's. I'm very excited about. And then of course there's NetraMark.com, which is I don't love the website, but now with our new funding, we're going to beef that up soon. But you can look me up at NetraMark.com and yeah, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and yeah, I usually try to make the time for people that reach out, and yeah, I mean, I'm one of my I consider it one of my roles to educate as well, right? And I'm a professor of molecular medicine, but mostly right now is like like the hard grind of getting the business to to grow to the next stages, right?
Yeah, it's
That's really
that's what every startup faces, and not necessarily that your startup at this point, but it's continuous, and
oh
then
I
it's the
am
stress of a CEO
yeah
to put where your true strengths are, but then make sure that the business can never suffer because you got to manage both. And I
yeah
admire you for doing it. I like picking your brain on all this stuff, and I want to have you back because I still want to get one day way more into quantum computing with you. I want to get more into
yeah
math art with you. You've been
yeah.
doing some cool stuff in the past there, and learning more about, of course, which we'll all do together about psychedelics. So thank you so much, Dr. Joe Geraci.
Awesome.
And yeah, good dude, man. Thank you.
All right, Todd. Thank you, man.
Okay. Talk soon. Thanks to everyone for listening to the High Times Psychedelic podcast. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks again. Make sure you get us and give us 5 stars if you can. Nice little review, and reach out to Dr. Joe as well. Thanks again. Have a good evening or good day or good whatever, wherever you are. We love you all. Bye. See you. Thanks, Joe.